So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session. We're very excited that this year, as one of the public events, we have gender as one of the topics. We have with us a very distinguished panel of speakers. So welcome again. And I'm Shagun Mehrotra. It's my honor to actually be the moderator and facilitate this discussion. The key objectives of this discussion, of course, are really to reflect on all our work that we've done, all the experiences in the room, particularly amongst the panelists, of really what works, really trying to understand what are the lessons, where are the opportunities to do better on gender. I'll start by briefly introducing the theme, following which I would introduce our speakers, and then we'll get into the panel discussion. So welcome again, welcome to the speakers, and welcome to the audience. So this seminar is titled, What Works? Lessons Learned on Integrating Gender in AIIB Operations. We have actually gone quite a long way in our journey on gender integration, and we felt that it was really important for us to reflect on all the work that we've been doing on integrating gender in operations and really see where we are and what is the roadmap really for us to go forward. AIIB, as you know, is firmly committed to gender equality in the projects we finance. This commitment is embedded in our foundational frameworks, including our 2030 corporate strategy, our environmental and social framework, our sector strategies, and our operational policy on financing. To further strengthen this commitment, as many of you know, we launched the Gender Action Plan in September 2024, which aims to further amplify our existing operational work in gender in a more foundational and systematic way. One of the main focus of our work, of course, is to see what the clients want, to understand the different contexts that we work in, to try to be responsive to the requirements of the client, and of course, to align with our own commitments on gender. Globally, there is a growing recognition that gender equality is essential to sustainable development, organizational excellence, and social progress. However, today we're seeing a shift. The conversation is no longer about why gender matters, but how we put our commitments into lasting, meaningful action. That shift demands more than just policy statements. It demands us to do better, to do things together. It calls for leadership, collaboration, and concrete action. We are especially pleased today to be joined by a very distinguished panel representing institutions and individuals that have been in the forefront of advancing gender work and towards meeting gender equality objectives. They have all a very deep commitment to integrating gender in a very meaningful, effective, and on showing results. We are excited to hear from each of them and learn from their diverse perspectives. And as I will introduce them, you'll see that we do have a very diverse panel, which is really a great opportunity for all of us to really engage with them. So after the panel discussion, we will open it up for questions. We will allow for the audience to engage with our panelists and to really be able to learn the most we can from their experiences. Allow me to introduce our panelists. I'll start with Mari Kivaniemi. Welcome, Mari, to our panel. It's really an honor to have you here with us. Mari served as Finland's second woman prime minister from 2010 to 2011 and as Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, that is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, from 2014 to 2018. She is currently an International Advisory Panel member to AIIB, and she continues to support and advise AIIB in shaping strategic frameworks that impact AIIB's direction of work, our global direction, and as well as advocating for a more inclusive, sustainable and gender responsive approach. Currently, Mari is the chair of the board of the University of Vasa and a member of the board of directors of the publicly listed company Metsa Board. She is also a member of Club de Madrid, an organization of former heads of states and governments. Throughout her career, Mari has contributed to high-level advisory panels and played a key role in guiding institutions towards more inclusive and gender-responsive approaches. Mari, we are really happy to have you. Welcome again. Thank you. Our second distinguished speaker is Dr. Adil Najam. Dr. Najam is the global president of the World Wildlife Fund. He was the founding dean of the Boston University's Pardee School of Global Studies from 2014 to 2022 and continues as Dean and Professor of International Relations and Earth and Environment at the Boston University. Dr. Najam was the co-author for the third and fourth assessments of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The government of Pakistan has conferred on him two of the highest civil awards for his global contribution to education and to climate change research. In 2010, Star of Excellence, and in 2023, Crescent of Excellence, both awarded by the President of Pakistan. Welcome, Dr. Adil. It's really good to have you with us. Our third panelist is Shami Nissam. With over 24 years of experience in sustainability, Shami is a sustainability leader. And we're really happy to have you with us, Shami. Shami leads ACTIS, which is Accountability, Collaboration, Transparency, Inclusion, and Sustainability. And she leads their approach to sustainability and impact, working closely with investment colleagues and companies to assess and manage ESG issues, helping to build world-class businesses and to deliver measurable social benefits. Shami chairs many of the sustainability committees across ACTIS's portfolio. She's the chair of the ACTIS Net Zero Steering Committee and leads ACTIS's efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the portfolio. And finally, welcome Jennifer. We are very happy to have Jennifer Buckley with us. Jennifer, again, a leader in promoting women's empowerment. Jennifer is the managing director of Southeast Asia's Women Economic Empowerment Fund, better known as SWEEF Capital, and has led the restructuring of SWEEF Capital as an independent firm. She joined the Small Enterprise Assistance Fund in 2018 after having spent 20 years in private equity leadership roles, focusing on growing mid-sized businesses across Europe and Asia. She also led the SEAF Women's Opportunity Fund, and she has been spearheading and providing her leadership to furthering the cause of diversity, inclusion, and gender. So we're really happy to have you with us. I'd like to once again thank all of you for being here and thank our panelists, and we're hoping for a very engaging discussion today. Thank you. So Mari, let me start with you, if you permit. So we understand that you've been a leader, you've been the Prime Minister, you have navigated a lot of institutional change in government, you worked, you've been on a lot of multilateral development boards, you're also with the OECD. So really, my question to you is, what really, you know AIIB's work, you're a member of our advisory panel, really what are the priorities AIIB should be looking at in terms of strengthening our work on gender? We've started, and we're doing a lot, but we would really seek your views as to what we should prioritize on going forward.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. Happy to be here today and participate in this panel. But before I answer your question, what the AIIB should do and what it has done, I just want to kind of set the scene and remind us all about some basic facts when it comes to the gender equality. but it's utmost important that this panel is organized and it's utmost important that AIIB has placed gender high on its agenda. And that really is needed because regrettably global progress on equality is still far too slow. And repeating this basic truth may feel tiresome, yet constant reminder and clear facts are the only route to improvement. Evidence-based information about how gender equality accelerates the development of society as a whole is essential, and even in age of disinformation, hard facts remain the most persuasive tool. We are meeting in Beijing, the very city where 30 years ago governments committed themselves to advancing women's status in every sphere of life: education, the economy, politics, and work. And the Beijing Platform for Action set 12 critical objectives, from greater political participation and pay equity to eliminating violence and improving girls' education. And much has, of course, improved since 30 years' time when it comes to, for example, political participation, which I know well. In 1995, women held just 11% of world's parliamentary seats, and today the share is 27%. In my country, more than 40%, and class ceilings really have been broken, and many countries have now had a woman as prime minister or president. Education was also one of the key words in the Beijing Declaration. Far more girls attend school, and in many countries, women form the majority of university students, making the recent backsliding in some countries where girls have been barred from schooling all the more disturbing. Legislation. Numerous states have enacted equal pay laws, family leave reforms, and criminalized gender-based violence. And in companies and international organizations, many institutions have set gender mainstreaming on the agenda, and it has become a norm. Yet progress is slow. The latest SDG progress report warns that at the present pace, full gender equality is nearly 300 years away. So much more needs to be done. And one concrete example of that, how far we still are, is South Asia, where the gap in labor force participation between men and women remains stuck at 30 percentage points, exactly where it stood in 1995. AIIB rightly highlights that closing the gender gap in Asia-Pacific labor markets would unlock $4.5 trillion in additional GDP each year, an economy the size of Germany. And when opportunity is distributed unevenly, tax bases shrink, social risk rises, and public trust erodes, and gender parity broadens the revenue base and deepens human capital stocks, making fiscal and political systems more resilient. And that is the case for advanced welfare economies such as my country, Finland, and also for rapidly growing Asian economies alike. So equality is therefore not merely a social policy issue, it belongs to the hardcore of economic strategy. And AIIB is in the key position helping to tackle the challenge. Infrastructure can play a very central role in improving women's lives. And the delivery of affordable, convenient, and reliable infrastructure can strengthen women's access to economic, political, and social opportunities, as well as essential education and healthcare services. But coming to, first I have to take some water.
Yeah.
But after setting the scene, now coming to AIIB's current strengths in mainstreaming gender in its works. So the current gender toolkit of the organization is impressive, and it has steadily improved. The Gender Action Plan to which was already referred, is a very comprehensive strategic paper, and mandatory gender action plan for every new operation is also an excellent request. Each project must include a gender impact analysis and a costed action matrix. Also, the revised environmental and social framework embeds gender considerations in both the bank's environmental and social standards, and the latest corporate strategy update has introduced a dedicated project completion gender impact indicator, ensuring that equality results are tracked and reported. So together, these instruments create a clear chain from policy to lending decisions to measurable outcomes. But there are some dimensions I would like to highlight as priorities for further improvement, because that is something what every organization really have to have a look at. Are we doing our best? And because the world also changes, the circumstances changes, you have to be ready to improve your toolkit and renew it. So first, data and evidence. Data really is power. What you cannot measure, you cannot improve. Gender disaggregated information must be collected systematically and published openly. For example, project-level indicators foster peer pressure, facilitate research, and accelerate results. Data sharing cooperation could also be intensified with member countries, especially with the host countries of AIIB-financed projects. Second is leadership. Objectives become reality only when leaders champion them. President Xi has done that, but banks' member countries' leaders' support is needed too. And when the tone from the top consistently stresses inclusion and fairness, these values permit strategy, culture, and external partnerships. And lasting change also relies on shared understanding across the workforce. Every member of staff needs the skills and resources to mainstream gender in daily work, and equipping staff with them ensures that the equality vision articulated by leaders is translated into everyday decision-making throughout the organization. Partnership and dialogue, cooperation with other multilateral banks, the private sector, and member states multiplies impact. Many peer institutions have placed gender at the forefront, and by working together, we achieve more. And I really want to underline also the importance of good cooperation on gender issues with with the bank's partners in different areas. And last but not least, I think that the bank should also be innovative and ready to implement new tools. And one kind of concrete example of those which some other banks are already now using new and and several multilateral lenders, they pilot these performance-based gender dividend mechanisms that reward borrowers only after auditable equality targets are met. So some kind of concept into its own gender dividend window would offer a modest margin discount or small grant that is unlocked only after independent verification of agreed gender indicators like jobs for women, time savings, parity in project governance, and so on. So that kind of a tool would complement also then the bank's existing gender action plan. So be innovative and really mainstream the gender thinking in the organization, in the projects, in the operations, and follow really the strategy in GAP which is set and make it reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mari. I think all very, very important points. Yes, we have begun to really look at results, look at data, ensure that we have disaggregated data across all our sectors and all our projects. So I think that's really the starting point, because like you said, if you can't measure it, then you don't know where you are. You don't know how far you have to still go, right? And if, for example, like the figures that you gave in terms of women's workforce participation still being what it was decades ago in South Asia, it's because we're measuring it. We know, right, that we haven't really made progress in that field. But also another very important point that you highlighted was partnerships. And for AIIB, I think working with like-minded individuals, like-minded institutions that are committed to collaborating and working on advancing gender equality objectives is really critical for us. So while we do have our gender action plan, we are really seeking more and more collaborative work, partnerships with other such like-minded institutions to be able to deliver results on the ground, right? So thank you so much for that. Thank you. I'd like request Dr. Adil now to share his thoughts, his reflections with us. I think Dr. Adil, as a global leader on particularly issues of the environment, climate, sustainability, you are really uniquely positioned, I think, to share with us about the intersection of gender.
Putting pressure on me now, right?
Yes, we have a lot of expectations.
Good.
I think the audience really wants to hear from all of you, all your experience. You're all leaders in your own fields. And I think really, I mean, we've been talking about the intersection of gender across, achieving sustainability, development goals, across environmental goals. But really, like, based on our own experience, your experience, the experience of WWF, what really are the lessons we've learned in terms of embedding gender as a cross-cutting priority in our initiatives? How far, how well have we done? What else do we need to think about?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here, and happy birthday to AIIB. Good 10 years, and wishing you many more of even more fruitful work. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you for your remarks, which reminded me that I had been in Beijing. I've had the pleasure of being here multiple times. It was, I don't know if it was October or something, because I know the weather was different, 1995, when the Beijing conference, the women's conference was held. And as you were talking about it, I sort of wanted to take myself back. I was a graduate student at the time. I was doing my PhD, and working on sort of what was then developing. I'd been to the Rio conference right before the Beijing conference. There was the Cairo conference on population, for some of you who may recall. There's a reason why I'm mentioning this, that it has been a journey. I think it's been a good journey. I think we need to celebrate that journey in the exact way that you've said. But I also think, and I hope I'm in amongst friends, I also think that so many years after that, we need to, and this is my central point, we need to be asking tougher questions of ourselves. Right? If we are asking the same questions we were in 1995, September or October, whenever the conference was, then I think we owe ourselves some introspection. And I think we can ask ourselves better questions and tougher questions, and by ourselves, I mean each one of us on this panel and each one of you in the audience in whatever capacity you are. The reason I think we can ask tougher questions is because we have learned. We have learned a lot of things about what works, what doesn't work, where we can push this conversation beyond slogans towards impact, which is not to say that we are only at slogans, but which is to say, I see young people in this room, I live in the US, it's particularly true there, it's very true in Europe, I think it's all true across Asia. Young people are asking us tougher questions. Right? My daughter says to me, okay, you've been working on this long, aren't you ashamed of yourself? Because the world is still a mess. And she's right. Right? So I think the challenge for us is, and this is the central point, how do we move this towards conversations on impact Not simply conversations. We have to have conversations on what the issue is, on what the challenges are, on what the importance of gender integration is. But we also need to have conversations and force ourselves empirically through what we measure on what is making an impact. And is it making an impact or not? An impact cannot be simply the input. Impact cannot be simply, this is how much money I spent on this, or this is what I put the rules as, or even this is how many people I hired, and so on and so forth. It has to be, is society better in terms of what we are working on? So I hope I'm amongst friends, because I do want to challenge, not you, myself. Right? I look at this wonderful panel that you have, and I've met some of you for the first time, and I'm in awe of everyone. And I was doing some mental math. I think there is at least 100 years of experience, not even counting mine on this panel, of commitment to this question. Right? And that 100 years or more of experience has to then move towards this. So what does this mean in practice, right? What does it mean in practice? I am much bruised, as are all of us, from what we have learned. Some of those things have worked, some of those have not. The reason I started also with the Beijing story, or the Rio or Cairo, it was a different time in the 90s. We kind of thought we could reshape the world. We had this sort of oomph about, we can go and make a better world. I think the moment we are living in is not exactly like that, but I think it requires the same drive, right? That the ambition level has to be higher. And at that time, as at this time, my work was on how do you bring humans into the environment and nature conversation, so that, for example, climate, which is what I work on, is not simply about carbon. It's not carbon counting. It's not a mathematic of carbon. Especially, and I'll come to this, what I've been writing for many years now is we are now in the age of adaptation. In the age of adaptation, climate impacts are not counted in carbon. When the floods hits Pakistan, my country, it doesn't matter what the carbon, for the person whose house has just been swept away, the element on the periodic table is not carbon. It's H2O, right? At that point, you have to start figuring about livelihoods. You have to start especially figuring about water. The reason I'm saying this is the following. That is where I think the integration, which is the key word to me in your title, comes in. That have we thought of gender, right? That's the human element. Not simply as one more thing to add on, right? An afterthought. We will make a project, and after we've made it, we'll say, okay, let's put a little gender component. Let's get someone to come and add, because AIIB has this policy or whatever. But have we vetted those projects for having actually thought through, asked the tough questions of why gender is important in that, right? I work on environment and nature, and I'm very proud of what my colleagues in WWF do. I just sit and take credit for that. But in many ways, we have tried to push ourselves very hard, and it's not easy, not to end with gender, but to begin with gender and all gender. And I'll tell you why. So for example, if we work on lions in the Serengeti in Tanzania, the reason you are interested in gender integration is because you cannot achieve your goals about lions in the Serengeti without thinking of women, right? For some of you, that may be a surprise, but it's not a surprise at all. You cannot do anything with lions in the Serengeti unless you are working with the Maasai. And if you cannot work with the Maasai unless you are talking about livelihoods, and you cannot understand livelihoods unless you have figured out who the primary custodians of nature and nature's resources are. And that's the women. In that society, as in many others. You cannot work on deforestation, right? You can come to deforestation and say, here, I have a project, and it's really about wood and lumber. And at the end of this, I will add a few criteria about my employment statistics and so on and so forth. That's very good. But that's a different approach then asking yourself the tough question, what is important here in terms of why am I interested in gender? Right? And it's a tough question because sometimes maybe the answer won't be the one you like. Right? So it becomes in your project cycle, not the thing that you do at the end, right before you approve it, by which time everyone has figured out it has to be approved. Right? It has to be in the questions that you hold everyone accountable to. I'm taking too long, but let me end with an example, which is not a WWF example, but I think it will resonate. It was a learning for me. I'm still learning a lot about this. A couple of years ago, many of you would know there was a massive flood in Pakistan. We get floods every year. They're actually so massive we don't even count them. We have had above average floods for 12 consecutive years now. Right? That's what climate change is. None of that is carbon. It's because of carbon, but you can't do anything about the flood with carbon, right? You do something about the flood with energy and housing and schools and so on and so forth. After the Pakistan floods, which I'm sure everyone here knows about, I'm talking about 3 years ago, the Malala Fund approached me and said, we want to do something about climate change. Can you help us think about it? I've always been very fond of Malala personally, and because she called herself, I said, I'm very happy to, but I'm not sure I know what to do. And she said, what we are interested in, natural disasters, particularly floods, and girls' education. And I hope I'm friends because I'm going to say that something that might be misunderstood, please don't. My first thought was, but when a flood comes, it doesn't differentiate between girl students and boy students. Right? The water is not looking for women separately from men, so I'm not sure how I will make that difference. And they wanted to help us think about it. We work on girls' education, so that's our entry point. You understand climate, help us think about it. And it was one of the most eye-opening things for myself after even 30, 40 years of working on this issue, to realize you open that lid and ask tough questions and different answers come. Right? I won't take you through all the results, but one of the things we found as we did that the water doesn't discriminate, but the impacts of the water and the flood does. And those impacts are very different. Right? And so we started looking at, we said, okay, we'll ask 2 questions. We said, the 2 questions we asked ourselves was, one was, how does climate impact girls' education? And then the flip question, how does girls' education impact climate? Right? As opposed to we'll do a project and then we'll add a gender report. Right? And the eye-opening point for me, for you, it may be a very simple thing, but for me the big thing was that it was different. The answers to the 2 were different. And it was a useful answer because I thought it was a practical answer. And the answer was that there are 2 crises. Climate becomes a threat multiplier for education. All the problems that education has already, climate multiplies that. It becomes the threat multipliers for education, and education, particularly girls' education, becomes a solution multiplier for climate. So rather than it being sort of a negative thing, it suddenly becomes a positive thing. How does that happen? Where does the threat multiplication happen? Without going into the details, 3 things. Climate change increases learning loss. It increases learning loss for all students. It increases learning loss more for girl students. Why? Because girl students are less likely to be in school in the first place. They are the first ones to be taken off school as soon as you have a disaster. And they are the last ones to come back to school after the disaster subsides. This is true in floods. This is true in earthquakes and so on and so forth. Right? So learning loss was one. So we are talking very practical policy impact things. The other threat multiplier was infrastructure loss. Right? And that's why AIIB is important, because when you get natural disasters, you get an infrastructure hit in very many cases. In this case, in schools. Right? And there again, infrastructure that is already bad has a greater loss. And the third one, that there's a development loss. And the medical research on this was totally eye-opening. From literally changing the menstrual cycles to already marginalized populations of girl students, what natural disasters do, it multiplies it. I'm taking too long, so let me shut up in a minute, but on the positive...
This is very
on the other side, thank you, on the solution multiplication, because that's what excited me most, because you can do something then, right? Rather than just crib about it. The solution multiplication is, on how girls' education multiplies the climate benefits, right? If we talk benefits, people get more excited. You can then move to green infrastructure, right? And in that, in Pakistan, the government has now started taking this up. Schools happen to be disaster relief infrastructure. This is true in developed countries. It is increasingly true in climate-prone countries, and that can be put in. So one, it becomes a stimulus for green infrastructure. The second, and very important, it becomes a stimulus, or can become a stimulus, girls' education for skill development of particular skills that need to be developed, whether they are skills about managing renewable energy resources, whether they are skills about managing natural resources, and so on and so forth. And third is about green behaviors. Right? So again, I've given you a broad overview, but the point is not what we did with schools in Pakistan. The point is that I think we need to change the questions we ask. And more than the questions we ask, we need to change when we ask those questions. Right? And the tough part of this is that I am still optimistic enough to believe that if we ask the questions at the right point, we will see not only threats, but we will see opportunities. Because we ask the question at the end of the process, we are not liked. Because someone has just developed projects and we are in their way as this last hurdle for a tick box. If we work on the design element from the beginning, and that requires having an actual belief and empirical evidence to suggest that if you integrate, right, this is why I like the word integrate, if you integrate gender, you will have better outcomes. In my area of nature and climate, I'm quite convinced of it. Right? That you will have better outcomes in terms of sustainability over time. You will have better outcomes in terms of sustainability over natural resources, and you will have better outcomes in terms of sustainability over buy-in. Can I have just one last?
Yes, please, Dr.
Adil. This is going to be tough for me. One of the tragedies we found in the flood work that we were doing was we suddenly found, you mentioned, I think, about girls getting married earlier. Right? If you don't do this, if you don't do the sustainable infrastructure, what was happening was, and we now have this empirically, girls were being taken off, not because their parents don't love them, their parents love them as much as we do. Right? But my school has been blown away. I am taken off from school. Now, after the floods, some of the schools are coming back, and what we found was empirically more girls were being married off earlier. This is not about culture. This is not about parents not liking them. This is about parents who love their daughters, saying that the best thing I can do for them is to give them safety somewhere away from what is being hit by climate. Right? So that is what I mean by asking the tough questions. That we want to have tough conversations earlier on in the process. My apologies for taking too long, but I think we are actually at an exciting point because we can ask these questions. And it will be a tragedy if we don't.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adil. I think your passion for the environment, climate issues, and more so for gender, I think really came through. And it's really inspiring, I think, and encouraging for all of us. And I just wanted to say that, yes, you've raised some very pertinent issues. One is something that we at AIIB are really focusing on in terms of asking those questions at the beginning of projects, right? So we are emphasizing again and again about how it's really important to do a good gender analysis as part of our social analysis, environmental analysis. You know, when my team, environmental and social specialists, initially, you know, try to do an analysis, the due diligence of projects, one of the things that we are really talking about now is that ask the right questions on gender. Because like you said, the project might not be related to gender. It could be an infrastructure project, energy project, any project. But the point is that the impact of that project, or of, like you said, natural disasters, impacts men and women, boys and girls in very different ways. And I think it's important to understand that.
Can I, not to take time, but one line, and we can come to this later. I will challenge people to show me a project that's not related to gender.
Yeah.
I have never seen one. Please show me that project.
Yes, thank you for saying that. And I think that comes to our other point also about, and I know that when we were talking before, Jennifer mentioned how she was at a conference recently on climate and how, there was all this discussion about how the advocates of gender are sitting separately, the advocates of climate change and environment are sitting separately, and they're not talking to each other. And we feel that institutionally also, very often in our institutions, we're all working in silos, we're wearing an environmental hat or a social hat or a gender hat, and we just think that, social or gender is your problem. It's not my problem as an environmental person. So really, I think important for all of us to hear this question. So thank you so much for raising that. And we'll come back to opportunities, I think, if time permits and we have a second round. We'd like to now turn to Shami. Shami, thank you so much for joining us. And it would be really now interesting to hear your perspectives, because I know that your focus is emerging markets. And we do know that there are lots of gender disparities that persist, they're systemic, and we know that you and your organization has really been working to close those gaps, right? And really show and demonstrate on the ground measures that can effectively integrate gender in emerging markets and in sectors that are very often very male-dominated. So do share your experience with us.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's such an important topic, and like Adil, I want to emphasize that word and actually verb, integrate, because it's at the heart of, I think, what I want to talk about. So Actis is an investor into infrastructure in growth markets. We invest in energy, infrastructure, in real estate, and also in digital. Across Latin America, Asia, and Africa, so pretty much across the Southern Hemisphere. And integration comes into the picture in two ways. So as an investor, we really need to integrate sustainability and gender into our investment process. So this is to the point we made earlier. Don't think about it at the end, don't add it as an afterthought, and don't think of it as a silo. So that's what I mean by integrate it into the investment process. We think about sustainability from day one of a transaction, of a potential investment. And that focus on sustainability stays throughout the due diligence process, where it's very easy to focus on the due diligence, and then once the investment is made, to kind of sit back a little. And that's also where there's a missed opportunity for real impact. So we're really integrated in terms of sustainability throughout due diligence and then throughout our ownership phase. And we very much act as an active owner. We tend to have majority stakes. And that's really important to say, because that means in all aspects of our sustainability work, our value creation plans, we can focus on what we want to execute, what we want to change, and that includes gender. And we focus on impact. And just to kind of double click on Adil's comment about what is impact and theory of change, it's an input to generate an output, to generate an impact, right? So the input might be the money you spend on training. Your output might be, I've trained 700 people, but what's the real impact? How does their life change for the better? That's the real question we're talking about, and that's what I mean by real world impact. So integration is really important, but let me just kind of start a little bit high level with Actis. One of our values as a corporate is inclusion. Another one of our values is sustainability. So this really has to kind of come from the top. You mentioned this also, Mari, is like tone at the top. And for us, it starts there. And if you don't really have it almost as part of your mission from the beginning, I believe it makes it much harder to integrate it into the design. It has to be there in the first place. So we focus on kind of gender throughout the process at Actis, but also in the portfolio. And the way that this comes through a lot as an infrastructure investor, we're not investing in something that looks obviously like a gender-related project. We're investing in toll roads, in energy generation, in data centers. But what really happens in our markets with infrastructure and gender is that it's a very male-dominated sector, right? We're talking about creating portfolio companies that are building, operating, owning infrastructure, which means you're working with large construction companies during that construction phase before it's operational. This is civil engineering, electrical engineering. These are not sectors that typically have high percentage of females participating in the workforce. And then if you look at it through an emerging markets lens, even less so. So for us, it's really about understanding how can we look at the kind of domestic workforce and the local community around the infrastructure to create an opportunity to upskill, reskill, deliver vocational training opportunities so that all of those people, but especially women, have an opportunity to participate economically in these energy transition industries. One of the big limiting factors to energy transition and us all meeting net zero right now is talent. There aren't enough people that we can rely on in terms of our workforces to build and operate these assets. We need civil engineers, we need health and safety technicians, we need data analysts, we need the works, right? So actually a very clever way of boosting economic growth, achieving social license to operate, delivering women's economic empowerment, all of those things come together in curating training programs that allow local people in the region to get these skills and to take part in these projects. And it doesn't matter if it's an Actis project, it'll be someone else's project tomorrow because now they have that skill. So that's one of the key ways that we focus on the gender equation. And to give you some specific examples, sometimes the training programs are exclusively for women. So one of our businesses trained over 800 females in Latin America on solar panel installation techniques. 800 women trained on how to install solar panels across 3 countries. That company also focused on gender internally at the corporate level, and they went from 19% female to 39% female. And that company also worked with its contractors to crowbar into the legal documentation that contractor had to employ at least 10% of females at the site in the workforce. The average was 2%. And all of this was achieved. So we're talking about real-world impact, we're talking about results, and we're talking about measuring with numbers. So it is doable to do these things. So it's easy to get, you're very optimistic, and I appreciate it. I think anyone working in sustainability has to be optimistic these days. Exactly. But, you know, it's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom, and I wanted to share that example because it shows that this can be done, and we're not a DFI, we're not blended finance investor, this is just, you know, pure investing. And when people ask me, well, what's the business case? You know, how have you made the link there, which is such a key question? It's social license to operate a lot, is a lot of the answer. So, you know, building infrastructure in growth markets, as many of you will know, can create a lot of tension with local communities. They are our host communities, they are our neighbors. How do you get in front of that so that you can communicate that you are here as a responsible corporate citizen for the long term? You are going to create shared value and wealth for the long term. And one of the best things that you can do is create job opportunities and make people ready for work. Because every time we run any community engagement program anywhere in the world with our infrastructure, if you ask people what do you want, number 1 on their list is jobs, always. So it's a great way of securing that social license to operate, which de-risks the asset, de-risks the project, de-risks that infrastructure from unwanted negative tensions which unfortunately can impact projects and timelines and budgets and reputations. So that's how I kind of connect that circle back to business case. Do this investment in community, focus on women and girls, and secure your social license to operate. So I wanted to share also a couple of other examples just to bring this to life. And you talked so much about education and girls. In Bangladesh, one of our businesses has basically launched a scholarship program to take 50 of the local teenage girls around our plant and basically pay for them to go to school for the next 2 years. This is Bangladesh, the lowest lying country in the world, or one of, the most cyclonic country in the world, very physically vulnerable to climate change. Very basic facilities in these villages in terms of primary healthcare and education. There is a huge amount of pressure on the families in terms of livelihoods. Some of these girls are married off very early, 14 and 15. So one of the most impactful things that we thought that we could do with our business was to make sure they just keep going to school. So that's an example of a project that tied nicely to kind of what you were saying. So the form that our community investment takes looks very different in different communities, but it has to be bottom up based on the developmental needs of that community. So it's right that it looks different, but there's a massive focus around education and skills, basically is what I'm saying. We've also done work, for example, with apprenticeships and internships. So looking at females that are coming out of schools or colleges and need that crucial practical experience step in order to secure a career. Some of our businesses are also offering that. So I think there's a huge, not to focus on the challenges, there are many, but there's a huge opportunity here that can be seized by private sector investments and can be supported, Shagan, to your question, through partnerships with NDBs. And we have common goals, and this is kind of the way that we can achieve them together. I don't want to kind of pass to Jennifer before mentioning that there is a very basic level of safeguarding responsibility that comes with investing in infrastructure when we think about gender, women, and girls. And I don't want to skate over that challenge because it's very real. I've had several conversations with CEOs of our businesses where we've talked about what can we do about improving opportunities for women and girls. And he'll just say, Shami, I don't want to hire any women because I just can't make sure that they have a safe environment at work. And sometimes it's not at work, it's actually getting to work and getting home from work. So we have to recognize that there are some basic safeguarding elements that have to be put in place before we can even aspire to these other more inclusive activities. We have to get them to work safely. We have to create adequate facilities at these sites, at these construction sites. We have to make sure that the culture is fair, respectful, and safe. So there's a whole, kind of body of work that needs to happen there as well. We do training at our sites and companies on GBVH, gender-based violence and harassment, for example. So for me, it's a little bit like a staircase. You have to start with, avoiding the harm. You have to put in those safeguards and building blocks, and then you can start to do these more sophisticated kind of training and other programs. But if you have a kind of process, a structure, a systematic way of doing this over and over, and you refine that and you fine-tune it with lessons learned, I guess I'm here to say that we can make it work and we can have these really fantastic outcomes on the ground, real-world impact. So there is a way forward, and really our challenge is about kind of gathering the secrets to success, demystifying it. So a compendium of case studies, very practical, this is how it works and this is how you can do it. And then just socializing, cascading, sharing that, and using our platforms and our advocacy and through our partnerships to make sure as many people are investing in that way as possible. I'll probably leave it there. It's a good place.
Thank you, Shami. I'm glad that you also talked about the whole issue of safety and security, because like you said, rightly, it's like a stairwell where, you have to first ensure safeguards. You have to ensure that women are safely, of course, that they have to have the skills, the education, the skills to be able to enter the workforce, but also to be able to go safely to where they have to work, to go back home safely, and where they work, that space, the culture, and that's the foundation, right? We need
and
to
I
set
forgot
that
to
up
mention
before
childcare as well for the
childcare.
mothers.
Yeah, in fact, AIIB last year, along with UN Women, we did come up with a report on investing in care infrastructure, which was something that was welcomed by all the MDBs, because we were really talking about, creating and taking care infrastructure very seriously. And also just wanted to share that our environmental and social framework is really within that. Gender is embedded within that, and there are 2 principles we work on, which is do no harm and do better. And like you said rightly, we do have to ensure do no harm, but we definitely do need to keep asking the right questions and do better, right? So thank you for sharing that. I'll now turn to Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm a great fan. Because I think your work on gender lens investing, working on women businesses, working in the equity space, it's really been something, particularly in Southeast Asia, very encouraging. So we'd really like to hear from you what are the ways in which you're promoting women's empowerment, but also really how have you translated all of those aspirational objectives, goals, commitments into action on the ground? Thanks.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today, and incredible to see how far AIIB has come in just a short 10 years. As Dr. Adil was speaking, I was thinking about my own daughter. She's 15 years old, and all of her friends, and I'm more positive about my view on the world for her. I believe that there are moments in history when systems begin to shift, and I do believe that we're living through one of those now. I think traditional business models are being questioned, and we're all sitting here in Beijing today because governments are looking at new ways to meet social and economic needs in their countries. And there's a new generation, and this is where I'm very optimistic, there's a new generation of digital native entrepreneurs that are rising fast, particularly in my region in Southeast Asia. And it gives me, just being with those entrepreneurs and seeing the types of challenges they're addressing for their countries, whether it's thinking about affordable, accessible healthcare systems. It's looking at how they ensure that there's education for all. How do we ensure that children are receiving the right skills they need for the future of work? There's just been a study that was published by LinkedIn. Everyone knows, as Shami alluded to, we have a huge shortage of people that they have an understanding of green skills. What that research was showing is if you do have an understanding of green skills, today you're 62% more likely to get a job, and you're also going to be earning more than others. So think about the potential there to ensure girls around the world are able to access those green skills and really come through and be the pipeline of talent for green infrastructure projects. Having been in the private equity industry for 25 years, I really believe that this isn't a wave. I actually believe that this is a transformation. I think impact investing is coming of age. I think the engine behind it is the growing talent of women entrepreneurs that are building climate-smart businesses, coming through, profitable, community-driven enterprises. They have a different perspective on how to build their businesses. And globally, impact investing, I think the last survey that Jen did, there was 1.1 trillion that had been raised for impact, and that's doubled in the last couple of years. So why does that matter? Well, I think it matters to AIIB and for all of us because it's changing the nature of the enterprises that we'll be supporting going forward. I think that number also matters because it reflects that investors are looking for more than profit. They are starting to think about purpose. And for SWEEF and our fundraising, as an example, we're very grateful to AIIB for the them taking a very early commitment in the fund that offered a lot of credibility for us when we were going out to other investors during the fundraising process, that enabled us to mobilize another close to 18 family offices from around the world. It allowed us to get a US corporate into the fund and allowed us to get a large global insurance company. And that's into a small fund in Southeast Asia, really a region that is not featuring in a lot of LP portfolios globally. But before AIIB came in, we accessed an anchor commitment from a Danish pension plan. Now, why did that pension plan come into the first closing of a small, very innovative women's economic empowerment fund in Southeast Asia? It's because they interviewed their members and said, if we want to put an impact lens across our pension plan, what is the impact that you care about? So what was special about that pension fund's membership base? They were the kindergarten teachers and social workers of Denmark. So when they were asked that question, their answer was, we want to do something that supports women and girls globally. And so that's why the Danish pension plan came into our fund. And I think that's an increasing trend that we're seeing amongst investors. And it's something that everyone in this room has a role to play. When we're thinking about how we're taking investment decisions and how we're allocating capital, really thinking about the purpose behind that capital allocation. Another, I think, example for us in Southeast Asia, and it connects to our work with AIIB. When AIIB was doing the underwriting of SWIFT, we were very strong from a gender lens perspective. That's an area we've worked hard on. We developed a methodology. It's called the Gender ROI. I welcome all of you to go on the SWIFT website and look at that methodology. ROI in this case stands for Resilience, Opportunity and Inclusion. It's about how to ensure women are more resilient in businesses and economies. It's about ensuring they have opportunities, and it's also about ensuring once we're giving them opportunities, they are able to operate in an inclusive environment. We apply it to women, but it's equally applicable to any diversity area. And it looks at 24 different indicators in business, and really allows you to get an understanding of value drivers in business. And from a partnership perspective, I would love to be working with as many of you as possible to be getting as many enterprises around the world scored with the Gender ROI methodology, because what that allows us to do is understand baselines and then understand when we're working on gender responsive programs, how those policies, procedures, and activities that we're working on are driving value in businesses. Because there is the group, and I'd love to work with Dr. Dill and his academic team on taking that database and really running lots of different considering lots of hypotheses there. But coming back to AIIB, because we were so focused on gender, we didn't have many people in the team, well, we didn't have anyone in the team that came from a climate background. And AIIB was enabled the SWIFT team to get up the learning curve on climate frameworks and how to think about climate due diligence in the context of our portfolio. Now, why does this matter? It matters because of the point that was raised earlier, because in the current environment, we are often working in silos where we have the climate teams on one side and we have the gender teams on the other side. And there's not a lot of bridging going on between. Now, we posited, because we'd built up this women's economic empowerment program that we'd developed from scratch, we thought that we could apply the same type of thinking to the gender climate world. So we went out and spoke to different governments about our vision there, and we were able to access support from the Australian government to work within their bilateral program in Indonesia. So what that's meant for Indonesia is we now have a program in place that's allowing us to think really thoughtfully about how we can best support their climate leaders coming through, many of whom are women, because they're the ones that are disproportionately affected by climate change. And so they're the ones that are coming up with solutions. They're coming up with recycling solutions, flood prevention, circular economy solutions, water management. There's an incredible amount of innovation coming through in women's entrepreneurship in the green economy in Indonesia. So we're looking at how we can best turbocharge those businesses to get them through to the growth stage. And alongside that work, ensure that everyone working in that ecosystem and the impact, gender, climate ecosystem is all mobilizing around a common vision for Indonesia. So we're really bringing that ecosystem together because it's all about partnership. Sweep's a small team. There's only so much we can do. But when we get the whole ecosystem working together, and thankfully the Indonesian ecosystem is extremely cohesive, and there's a lot of support from the Indonesian government, as you heard from the Minister of Finance today, to make that happen. Now, why that's exciting is AIIB enabled this program to happen, but as we're working on developing those companies, we're also, in building them organically, we're also going to start understanding the funding needs of those businesses. So a lot of the businesses operating in gender climate at the moment are nascent. They're startups, they're ideations coming out of universities. So we need to get them through to the growth stage. We will want to support them to focus on revenue generation initiatives, but over time they will need funding. But we'll have an entire map of every company operating in Indonesia in that area and what their funding needs are. That allows us to get very sophisticated about blended finance models and really look at where we can ensure Indonesia gets access to outsized pool of grants available in that area from the global system. It allows us to think thoughtfully about where working capital, short-term debt can be playing a role, and what needs to happen from an early stage equity and later stage equity perspective. That's a wonderful opportunity to be working with AIIB to think about how to design some of those funding mechanisms. So we've only got 7 minutes, and I'm sure you have lots of questions, but that's the reason why I'm sitting here today feeling very optimistic about the future.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for that. And I remember when we were talking earlier, how you talked about how you were so impressed by the investment officers, the women investment officers, the male investment officers, and she said to me that you have gender champions across AIB. I understand you have a gender team and you're somebody who's working on the gender team, but I see so many gender champions within AIB in the IOs across the bank, and how they have actually been able to draw on your experience, but also you've been able to really benefit from the focus on climate and how you've really been able to intersect, right, gender with that work. So.
And there's just one comment I want to make. Let's keep our fingers crossed that that work in Indonesia goes spectacularly, because that provides a blueprint. What we're doing in Indonesia can be applied to, if it works, it's something that we can replicate in any country in the world. It doesn't need to be a developing market. I come from New Zealand. I can see New Zealand needing this type of program as well. Likewise, Australia, who's funding the program. I think Australia can benefit from some of the learnings that will come through. So.
Thank you. And I think now that the audience knows all of you, please feel free after this seminar to connect with the panelists for any further questions you have, anything you'd want to know about. Like you said, all of you are doing great work in your own areas and on integrating gender, so please feel free to reach out to our panelists. I'm mindful of the time. We do have 5 minutes still, so we would like to open it up for questions. I think we have a great audience, and they've been listening patiently, so over to you. I'd just like you to be, since we have less time, please ensure that your questions are like focused around the themes that have been discussed, and if you could refer to the panelists or the speakers who you'd like to respond to your question, then we could do that, or we could just open it up. I see a hand there. I think here. Well, please introduce yourself. Maybe I'll take two questions, one there, one here, and then we'll respond.
Hi, my name is Yan. I'm from AIIB, and thank you for this very inspiring discussion. I want to actually take the time to thank Ms. Nisan Sharmi. I learned that Actis has a program called Young Women into Finance, which is supported by Actis, and I'm actually participating in that program. And I now have a 18-year-old mentee who is a high school girl in London who wants to enter the finance world. This reminds me of my own experience. So there are times I enter into meeting rooms and find that the room is full of males. And there was an experience that I found out I was the only person in pink in that room. And I'm glad to see we have more pink in this panel today. So I actually do have a question. So what are the industry practice we can think of, like providing the mechanism to help systematic change, to help to engage more women into the workplace? So yeah, I'm very excited to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe, Shami, we could have one more question. I think, yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to listen to you. My name is Delfruza, and I will ask a question on my own capacity as a human rights lawyer, if you allow me to do that. We know that payment gap between men and women is more than 20%, especially when it comes to the very male-dominated sector. And I refer to our ladies who were mentioning about that consequently, right? And then when we talk about gaps, and then when we talk about infrastructure, there the safety issue is one of the key issues that we have when women are involved into that sector. So when we talk about gender-based violence or sexual harassment at the workplace, especially in the construction and in infrastructure processes, then we know that whistleblowing system sometimes is not working. And there we have a lot of big issues when it comes to implementation of the project, right? So this is what we face all the time, especially when we work in infrastructure. And when it comes to the protection of these vulnerable people, it goes even worse because sometimes national systems does not allow to protect the women who face sexual harassment because not every site has the cameras, not everyone is recording their conversations and etc. So it goes very hard for women, especially in vulnerable communities or in the villages to work or be engaged in terms of the employment opportunities and etc. And CEDAW committee recently, I mean, UN Women or CEDAW UN committees, they are issuing a lot of reports when it shows that women in vulnerable situations getting even worse in terms of the constructions or infrastructure projects and work there. So my question goes to maybe Mary or maybe Shami or Jennifer can also comment, or Dr. Adil, how we can incentivize private sector to be more cautious about policies for ensuring safety in male-dominated sectors. Because for government, it's must to do, right? If you ratify CEDAW, then you have to do it. It's very straightforward. But for the private sector, there is no much of the push. Maybe it's ESG, but at the same time, it's a very private sector. So what else we can do as a community, as a people, to ensure that women who are engaged into very low-paid jobs or in very difficult jobs or in heavily male-dominated sectors be safe and then be sure. Thank you.
Thank you. We actually literally have 1 minute left. There's this big clock in front of me. That's the countdown has begun. So thank you for your questions. I saw one more hand there. So we take a third and then maybe you could just respond to all of them together. We need a mic there. And I think, sorry, but like I said, please you're free to have a discussion with our panelists after the session. So do introduce yourselves and have that discussion. Yes.
Thank you, Shagun. My name is Alex Hadjionov, Principal Environmental Specialist. The discussion and the messages delivered by Mari, Adil, Shami, Jennifer resonate very deeply with me. The need of asking the right questions, integration between climate, biodiversity, gender, broader sustainability, links between sustainability and what is good for sustainability, in my opinion, actually is good for the economic outputs, for the financial outputs of the project. But I have a question, probably for Dr. Adil, but Mari, Shami, Jennifer, feel free to also to. If we narrow down at MDB, our focus at MDB, what would be your recommendation for MDBs to do better? We tend to think of ourselves as accelerators, as pioneering certain approaches, but I'm pretty cautious that not always we are doing the best. We can do better. What you would recommend us? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Shami, I think a direct question to you, and then Mari, Dr. Adil, Jennifer, please feel free to respond to the others. And sorry, we are out of time, so I'd request you to just quickly respond.
Thank you so much. Great to meet you. Well done for being in that program. I think your question about how do we systematically kind of encourage more females, did you mean into the finance industry or all the industries? Gosh, that is more than we have time to answer. But I think that, I guess like it comes down to a really simple truth, right? Everybody wants their organization to succeed. Private sector, investor, public, whatever. And 50% of the talent and brains on this planet are with women. So why on earth would anyone do anything to minimize their access to the talent pool? So for me, it starts there as a very kind of basic fact, and that is a fact. So I think that there are many barriers, as we know, for different reasons in different cultures and sectors, but it needs a concerted effort, and it needs partnership. It needs everyone working together and staying very solid and convinced in their views, especially at a time like this where there's a lot of pushback and headwinds against kind of diversity programs. We must really kind of keep our spine on this and look onwards and upwards.
Thank you, Shami. Mari?
So coming to this question concerning how those private companies could be safer places to women to work, which are male-dominated, I think legislation is really a key, so that all the companies are obliged to, for example, have a gender equality program, or which is the case in Europe when it comes to companies which have more than, I think, 20 or 30 employees. So legislation really, which also makes it illegal for harassment and obliges companies to have ethics function, so that you really can then tell someone in the company if you are misconducted. So legislation really is the key, that not only the public sector but also private sector companies have that kind of policies and procedures which are then align gender equality.
Thank you, Mari. Jennifer?
I'll just make one comment, because the reason why I'm passionate about the Gender ROI tool is because it touches on all of these issues. Within the ROI, it talks about the flexibility, the professional development, the performance evaluation, the being cognizant of childcare needs and other things. Everything an enterprise needs to think about associated with how to encourage more women to join the enterprise is covered in that tool. Likewise, from a gender-based violence perspective, it's also a parameter in the tool. And it's, legislation's important, but sometimes companies don't know how to address these challenges. So in our region at the moment, we don't have a mapping of all the support services that are out there if an employee has a challenge from a gender-based violence perspective. What we do know is 1 in 3 women throughout their lives will have an issue from a gender-based violence perspective. So what we do articulate to our companies is that means at any point in time, you probably have an employee that has a challenge in this area, and you need to think about that and figure out what you can be doing to be supporting the employee. Just one final comment is, we're talking about gender-based violence in the context of construction and infrastructure, but just a statistic, healthcare, 48%, there was a study done recently, 48% of doctors, men and women, have suffered from a gender-based violence issue in the workplace. So it's all industries that we need to be thinking about.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for that. Final words, Dr. Adil,
Sure.
and particularly,
Thank
I think the question from our
Yes,
environmental...
I have a big zero in front of me, so I'll try to be as short as possible. The one-liner, but it's a very important liner, and I hope I'm amongst friends. We are not going to be honest about gender unless we start from a point of ensuring dignity and respect. Those are the key words. Dignity and respect for people of all genders, and especially the most vulnerable amongst those people. I think the vulnerability point is important, otherwise it becomes pro forma. Otherwise it becomes just sort of, I'll get more and stuff. So tough thing. Here is the answer, at least from me to you. What would I advise? Who am I to advise? I don't even know what I'm talking about. But my sense is that if we think our job is about integrating gender, or in my case, advocating for gender, then our job cannot be simply about putting gender into projects. That's a very good thing. Please do that. Our job has to be to help others identify where gender is in what they do. This is why I reacted to your thing. People are not bad. Investment officers, employers, and so on and so forth. These are smart people. These are good people. If I work on gender, then my job is to help them understand where gender is in their project. That's why it's difficult. Very short example, and I'll shut up, but I think it's a good example because it's an MDB example. 1988, first paper I ever published. Back in Pakistan, there was an ADB-funded project on biogas plants. This is before sort of the climate talk. I think people know what biogas plants are. It's an energy from waste at the farm level, small farm level. It was a very well-designed project. The project was that the project money gave the material, bricks and sheet metal and so on, pipes and so on and so forth, and training. And farmers had to do their own labor to build the plant. This stuff had happened in India, fairly successful, happened in China, very successful. In Pakistan, we were finding there was a graveyard of these, Maliha might know more about this, but graveyard of these biogas plants not working. Why were they not working, right? That's what my intervention was with other people. And it turned out, and this is what I'm saying, our job is to help people identify where gender is in its stuff. It wasn't working because the training had been given to men, assuming that energy is about money and energy will be produced. Turns out, who has the most interest in energy, especially for cooking? The person for whom the equivalent is 5 miles of walking for fuel wood. All the training you required was there is a U-pipe which gets clogged with what we call kachra, filth. And every few weeks you have to go and kick the pipe so that it cleans up. And then the damn thing is working okay. Right? So what I'm saying is, this is where the opportunity is. Not in putting it as a slogan, but helping people understand where gender is, because I refuse to believe that there is anything in the world that doesn't have a gender element in it. But if I just give slogans, that's not going to work. I have to give solutions. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you.